Thousands of oil wells in the U.S. sit idle, posing a significant and potentially deadly threat. Efforts are underway to plug them, but advocates warn that far greater action is needed. Denselow reports from Hobbs, New Mexico.
Abandoned and often forgotten. But idle oil and gas wells pose more than just an idle threat.
This valve is leaking as well, so what we're going to do is we're going to rig up onto this now and we're going to go ahead and start to measure what that gas is.
Drilling at this well here in Hobbs, New Mexico stopped more than 5 years ago. When production slows, wells like this cease to be profitable and are often abandoned. They're considered orphaned if there's no owner or a fiscally viable operator to plug them. Testing at this well reveals it's a super emitter, meaning it's still releasing high levels of methane gas into the atmosphere.
Methane is 84 times more potent than just carbon dioxide.
Curtis Shuck is the chairman and CEO of the Well Done Foundation. They work with local landowners and state regulatory agencies to help identify and seal wells here in New Mexico and over a dozen other states nationwide.
What happens is these wells start out and they produce, and then they start to produce less and produce less. Companies will take and they'll sell them or transfer them from one company to another, to another, to another. And so it starts off maybe as sort of a major player, and by the time it gets to the condition you see behind us here, it's like mom and pop oil.
New Mexico is the second largest oil-producing state in the US, with over 100,000 wells tapping into the oil and gas-rich Permian Basin. Plugging a well with cement can cost tens of thousands of dollars, too much for many smaller operators. New Mexico's been plugging up to 50 wells a year, and more than $40 million has been pumped into the state through the Federal Infrastructure and Jobs Act to boost cleanup efforts. But lawmakers in the state recently failed to pass legislation to try and unlock more funds for cleanup operations and put more of an onus on oil and gas firms to cover the costs.
It all boils down to additional money and resources, but I think the states, federal government, and operators are all going to have to come up with additional resources to address this issue. Otherwise, the legacy that will be left behind are sort of rusting derelicts in the desert.
Orphaned wells pose a risk both to the environment and the health of people living near these sites. Environmental advocates say this brings risks of prolonged exposure to things like volatile organic compounds that can be carcinogenic. The problems posed by orphaned wells aren't contained to the state of New Mexico. The issue runs far deeper. Experts say there are more than 1,700 documented orphaned wells in New Mexico alone, and over 125,000 nationwide. But if you take into account undocumented wells, some analysts say that figure could exceed 1 million. In 2021, the bipartisan infrastructure law earmarked $4.7 billion to shutter thousands of wells nationwide. Analysts say over the past year, those funds helped plug around 6,000 wells, with tens of thousands more to come. But that could still prove to be just a drop in the bucket.
There are around 200,000 or 300,000 idle wells in the United States right now, and hundreds of thousands of more very low producing or marginal wells, all of which are at high risk of becoming orphaned soon. Unless operators are setting aside $50, $75, or $100,000 per well to plug the wells, we're kind of in trouble.
Experts say orphaned wells are an issue for countries around the world, including in Southeast Asia.
Now we got to make sure we get good cement down around this surface casing to really seal up this annulus so that no gas can get back up and out.
Curtis Shuck uses social media to try and raise awareness and educate people about the severity of the issue. With enough pressure, advocates hope that real change is in the pipeline. Denselow, CNA, Hobbs, New Mexico.